Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at NextGen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Honiger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Honiger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast, doing this live from the World Angus Forum Expo here in Tamworth for those who are playing along at home. A great opportunity today to chat about Angus, and it's a great exhibition of the breed here. I think there's 500 cattle or something on ground. There's a lot of breeders here, some great information, great camaraderie forming, great networks forming. Great opportunity to really celebrate all things about beef and Angus in particular. Today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Chuck Grove. He's a significant figure in the American Angus industry. He was the president and chairman of the American Angus Association. So he's been part of the industry for a long, long time. Not that he's that old. I won't talk about that. But Chuck, thanks very much for taking the time out today. It's great to have you along.
Thank you. We've thoroughly enjoyed our trip to Australia. Very impressed with the people, with the cattle, with the cities, with the land. I'm just really, really impressed with everything we've seen and look forward to the following week.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. We might start back in the early days, I guess, growing up on your family's Angus farm or ranch. Back then, what was the sort of focus of that breeding program? And I guess just generally, what did that look like?
Yeah, I was born and raised on an Angus operation, a registered Angus operation. We live on that farm today. Back then, the premier or major focus was on the show ring. That was the main way to evaluate cattle, and whatever won Chicago or Denver, that was kind of the bulls that were being selected at that time. And so things have changed dramatically since my tenure in the Angus business.
Yeah, excellent. And we've seen that obviously across all industries. But it'd be nice just to, I think it's almost 40 years you've sort of been involved in Angus. So, yeah, maybe you'll just walk us through the major shifts that have been in the selection criteria from the 70s through to today.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting time. As I said, the show ring was the predominant selection tool that was used in the late 60s, early 70s. From an American Angus Association standpoint, initially, we did not control that much of the data. The state land-grant universities back then had more of the data. They were collecting the weaning weights and the yearling weights, and the association, as a staff member of the American Angus Association, we had to really actively participate and put on meetings and encourage Angus breeders to start submitting data to the American Angus Association. So as time went on, we got more and more data into our association, and I think that's the most beneficial thing that American Angus has done in that period of time.
Yeah, I think that's not unique to American Angus. Obviously, the Angus breed itself was early on in grabbing that data and using that data to its full advantage, which is why we see so many black cattle getting around this country, and I'm sure yours as well, because of that sort of focus on that information.
Absolutely, because today with the EPD system and genomics, we provide, and it's said by lots of people, we have a toolbox, but it's full of tools that you can change the population whatever direction you want to go, whether it's for calving ease or maximum growth or end product merit. There are selection tools that you can utilize. So, having that data. And then along with that, I think we're working towards more global, working with Australia, New Zealand, Europe. And as time progresses, I hope we get all these cattle so we can utilize more genetics, not necessarily from the United States. We'll be able to understand and see them on the same basis, the same EPD system. So I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, ultimate power. And I guess as we've seen the evolution of EPDs or EBVs, as we call them here, we've seen that early on, a few simple traits, and then it just gets more and more complex and more exciting in my mind. The better we can define the cattle with the data, the better we can find the right cattle for our operations.
Absolutely. And Mark McCulley, I'll quote him, the easy traits, we pretty well got those identified, whether that's carcass merit, whether that's calving ease or growth, but the tough traits that are out there, herd health, working fertility, the problem with fertility, as you know, is very lowly heritable. So if we can identify some method, some way of improving fertility in our cattle, and it wouldn't even take 1 or 2%. I mean, that is a dramatic increase because, as Dr. Bonsma from South Africa, a famous quote of his was, a large dead calf has a distressingly low growth rate. So fertility is absolutely the most important trait. And if we can move the needle just a little bit, it will reward us all tremendously.
This is a bit of a sheep quote, but I heard I was chatting with a guy before who said I've never shorn a dry cow, so not getting a lot of value out of it.
No, exactly right, exactly right. I think we'll just let that lay there.
Yeah, we'll leave that there. I guess we've over the time we've seen a major shift in the phenotype of the cattle. Obviously, I guess back in day dot, they were quite a small, compact breed through to massive frame score cattle, and then back sort of more moderated these days. I guess, yeah. What have you seen over that time, and what do you think the future will hold?
Yeah. I grew up showing cattle in the 60s, and at that time they were very small framed, and we continually tried to increase frame. And I don't know if I can say this for other countries, but the American way is if more is good, then a little more than that's even better, and more than that's better. And so the American Angus Association even came with an advertising campaign that featured an elephant, and a box of beef is, we're not in the elephant business. You can't fit an elephant into a box. So we went way too far extreme. I think we've backed the cattle down to where they're more functional now. They're not the cattle of the 60s, but they're certainly not the cattle of the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah. I guess one of the traits that's definitely become increasingly important, and for good reason, is marbling or IMF. I guess, yeah, how's that emphasis changed over your time, and what do you think that will look like?
It's changed tremendously. When I first started AN a lot of cows, I really didn't pay any attention to marbling. I was guilty of being an Angus breeder that thought, well, Angus cattle marble, there's no difference. Use bull XYZ. And obviously that's wrong. And I think it's my responsibility to put as much marbling into the cattle as possible, along with continuing to maintain the functional traits, whether that's calving ease, growth, docility, whatever. But at the end of the day, everybody's going to end up on a plate sometime. And our job is to make beef the most nutritious, sought-after product. And I think we all need to keep in mind, even though we're in the cattle business, we're truly in the food business. And it's our job to provide the consumer with the best eating experience and the best product available. Healthy, nutritious, and safe.
Yeah, 100% agree. I guess maybe 2 or 2.5 decades probably. Genomics has been part of how we've played the game, and I think we'll look back on these 2 decades as probably the most influential in genetics generally, just until we see what Allison's work does in terms of gene editing. But yeah, amazing power we now have in terms of genomics. How have you seen that evolve over time?
Oh, absolutely. The one thing with genomics, I would say where I've seen the most impact is when I sell a commercial bull buyer, he wants a heifer bull. And if that bull, prior to genomics, I was having some flare-ups, some bulls that, he was low birth weight, but there was a problem down the road, and you'd get a call, hey, I had to pull some calves. Since incorporating genomics, it's almost absolute. If you sell someone a bull, an registered Angus bull from the States, that's double-digit CED with genomic test, you never hear a complaint. It's absolute. They've got that deadlocked. So, and that's just one trait. The highly heritable traits, I think it really improves our ability to make more selection and put selection pressure where we can and really impact the population.
Yeah, those errors just get removed, and we've all been guilty of using a young bull or young ram that we probably shouldn't have. And if we had had genomics, we wouldn't have done that because we would have actually known what those faults were going to be.
Sure. But I would say this to you, with genomics, it's lowered my risk. It has improved the accuracy of those young sires. That's not to say that the phenotypic data is still king. Yeah. We still need all the phenotypic data so it can be incorporated into the genomics. I'm not the scientist. and I don't have to be. I'll give you another example. I turn on a TV. I don't know how it works, but it works. I truly believe in the genomics and the technology, and I see the results in the end product.
Yeah, no, great example. And in fact, most things in my life, I have no idea how they work, but they do. So that's quite good. I guess if you sort of close your eyes and imagine what a commercial Angus cow looks like in the US in 10 years' time, what would you describe that as?
Well, we have several programs designed to help commercial cattlemen. I think one of the most important ones is our GeneMax program, and commercial heifers that are tested utilizing that program, they'll get a set of indexes that are identical to the indexes that are on our registration certificate of any Angus bull. So they can look and say they want to increase their in-carcass merit. They can put a lot of pressure on $B. Or if they're more of a combination breeder that they're keeping all of their replacement heifers, they might look at $C, which is a combination of maternal and terminal. So I think we're providing them with the tools if they use registered Angus bulls. Then in addition, we have a feeder calf. You call them weaners here. We call them feeder calves, but we have a feeder calf marketing program where if, again, they use registered Angus bulls, prospective buyers, feed yards, can see the EPDs on the bulls that these calves were sired by, and they'll know how to feed the cattle, and it's truly generating a premium for those commercial cattlemen. So it all of this goes hand in glove.
Yeah, 100%. I guess over time we've seen, obviously all these advances, but there's the good old traditional principles still hold true. I guess what do you believe remains essential regardless of how good we get with our tech?
Oh, I don't think you can ever take the stockman out of the business, and hopefully that will never happen. Most of our operations are all family owned and multi-generational. So I think the true stockmanship, the ability to work with the cattle and care for the cattle, we need as much data as we can. I can't advocate enough how much I believe in utilizing the data to make improvements. But at the same time, the stockmanship, the ability to look after the cattle, disposition is a heritable trait, but at the same time, management, I think, enters into that quite a bit as well. So the welfare of the cattle, all of that goes hand in glove, again, with stockmanship.
This is probably a tough question, but that's what we're here for. If you kind of look around the cattle, you've had a good opportunity to look around Australia. Give me one strength and one weakness of the cattle you've seen.
It's interesting. I was just talking with Scott about that. The thing that has struck me more than anything, the cattle are very similar to American Angus cattle. The temperament, the disposition. I am really, really impressed how quiet these cattle are. We've made several stops at some farms, ranches. I guess you call them studs?
Or farm studs, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've made several stops, and, bus loads of people get off and the cattle just stand there. I like to think my cattle are pretty quiet. I don't think they would stand there and have 50 people walk right into them. So I would say temperament has struck me as much as anything.
Yeah, cool. Any weaknesses, the general weaknesses you've seen?
No, I don't think so. Unfortunately, I don't understand your EBV system like obviously our EPD system. Yeah. So it makes it a little tough to do direct comparisons on the data. Now we're working toward a global evaluation, and that's already started. And I think, again, that's critical. So we can use genetics from other countries in the States and be able to compare that data on equal footing.
Excellent. Most of our listeners are going to be in Australia and New Zealand, a few in Europe and a few in North America, but maybe just a commentary on what's happening in the US cattle industry at the moment. Obviously, it's a massive influencer of our markets, and so everyone's always interested in what's happening in the US.
Our business, the cattle business in the States, is better than anyone's ever seen it in their lifetime. Part of that is the nation's cow herd is, depending on who you talk to, about the size it was in the 50s. Somewhere between 27, 29 million beef cows, again, depending on whose numbers you look at. Now, those 20-some million cattle are more productive today than they were back in the 50s. COVID really affected our country in that people got used to eating good beef, and it increased the demand for certified Angus beef. It increased the demand for quality product. A lot of people bought beef cooked it at home because they couldn't go out, and they saw the difference. We are on pace to maybe have a record year, close to 1.3 billion pounds of certified Angus beef sold both in the U.S. and globally. So I would say the thing that I see happening in the future is we're going to continue to put emphasis on quality, more marbling into our cattle, and still maintain functional traits.
Excellent. There's two questions we ask all our guests these days, and sometimes they're the hardest that we ask. The first one of those is, what is the last thing you changed your mind about?
Wow, that's a very difficult question. I don't know that I can give you something specific, but I am constantly changing my mind on sire selection or whatever. I'm a big believer we can't do things the way we used to do. I'm not afraid of change. I welcome it. I think we're living in the best time possible as far as being able to improve our cattle, and the technology is going to continue to grow, and I welcome it with open arms. I think what we're going to be doing 20 years from now, we'll look back at, and it'll be the same as what I was referring to earlier in the 70s. Our only selection tool was looking at them. And I don't know what those things are going to be, but I welcome them.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck. And the final question is, who is the best person you've had the pleasure to learn from?
I don't know that if I can single it out to one specific individual. I would credit my father for giving me the passion to be in the cattle business and growing up in this business. In addition to that, I was very fortunate at the university I attended. I had a mentor there, Dr. Gary Menish, that had a major impact on my life. And then several staff members at the American Angus Association, from Jerry Morrow, Dick Spader, who some of your listening audience might know. He was the CEO of the American Angus Association at one time. And I would conclude with, as a regional manager for the American Angus Association, I got paid to go see how other Angus breeders were making a living. And I was fortunate to be around so many really, really intelligent Angus breeders, from a Henry Gardner, a Charles Cannon, a Dave Pingree, and those people. Those names wouldn't mean anything to your audience, but innovators, great breeders of Angus cattle. And so it provided me a really great learning opportunity.
Thanks very much. And I guess one thing that I'm really hot on is the fact that the best part about our industry is the fact that you ring up anybody or email anybody, they're happy to help. And I think the young people out there listening need to be really aware that it doesn't matter what your perception is about where you sit in the industry versus someone you want to contact. Get in touch, because most people are really, really keen to share their information.
Oh, no question. This is a family. As I said, most of our operations are family operations in the States. But again, as a young person, the opportunities are endless. And I understand the difficulty of finance and trying to buy land and the cattle and the equipment. That being said, you can work your way up to it. And there are plenty of examples of that in our country, of people that started with nothing and are now very successful Angus breeders. But the key factor is a work ethic. Roll up your sleeves and get after it, and not be afraid to do the hard work to get to the end.
Thanks, Chuck. I'll just quickly ask, is there any questions in the audience? We'll quickly do that if anyone wants to ask a question. I'm not that good at this game, so someone might have a good question. Nobody? Right, we'll do a wrap up. Thanks very much, Chuck. Really appreciate you taking the time out. I know you've got plenty to do. Yep. And thanks all to those listening along. For those who haven't listened to The Head Shepherd, you can find it on any of your podcast platforms. We do interviews like this every Monday. It's mostly about genetics. It shares between sheep and cattle. You can, whichever your disposition is, you can just ignore the sheep ones or the cattle ones, depending on what you do. But we'd love to have you listening along. But thanks very much, Chuck. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Again, I can't tell you how impressed I am with Australia. It's been a wonderful trip. Congratulations to the Australian Angus Society. They've done a marvelous job coordinating, and it's been a pleasure to meet all these Angus folk, not just from Australia, but all over the world.
Excellent. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.